If you ask 10 people of African descent to explain to you why Africa is in the state in which it is, politically, economically, and socially, a very significant number will tell you that the problem is corruption. They are not wrong. The question is why? What is the problem with corruption? Why is corruption a problem? In this video, I'm going to discuss corruption in African societies and perhaps explore and advance my own theory, my own personal theory of why corruption is a problem in Africa. But if you want the short version of it, it's that everything you know about corruption, every assumption you have about the fight against corruption, and every single law designed to combat corruption in Africa is completely wrong. But before we go into that, I have a story to tell you. This 93-year-old man sells his company for $1 billion, marries a 20-year-old girl, and moves to the woods. His goal is to spend the rest of his life with his young wife, a hunting rifle, and at peace. 2 months later, after he arrives at the ranch, his wife gets pregnant. He's ecstatic and very proud of himself. So he goes to his friend and says, "Can you see what I've done?" And his friend says, "No, I don't think you are the father of that child." He says, "What do you mean? I'm the father." He says, "Let me explain it to you in terms that you can understand. Let's say this morning, as you're leaving your house, you grab your hunting rifle. But unknown to you, what you have taken is not your hunting rifle, but your umbrella. As you get into the woods, you see this lion about 300 meters away from you. You take careful aim, squeeze the trigger, the lion drops dead." And the old man says, "No, that's not possible. Someone else must have shot the lion." He says, "Exactly. That's the point." Now, in technical terms, that is what we call a bug. When the result we get does not correspond to the output we expected to get. That's a bug. An example of this in political terms is the situation with corruption. We have so many anti-corruption laws. We have very strong social understanding that corruption is not good for us. So why do we have so much corruption going on? And why is corruption such a big problem? The problem may be different from what you think. You see, in every society, criminal laws must be written down. This comes from the old Latin maxim, nulla crimen, nulla poena, sine lege, which means no crime, no punishment except in accordance with written law. Now, what do criminal laws rely on? The Constitution. They derive their validity from the Constitution. And what does the Constitution derive its validity from? I'm glad you asked. A social contract, an implied contract between the people and the citizens. That is why every constitution in the world starts with these words: "We the people." It is a social contract that gives rise to a legal instrument called the Constitution. So the Constitution is not just a legal document. It is the legalization of accepted moral and social behavior. That is why certain countries have certain provisions in their constitution that you can't find in another constitution. Got it? So there is no criminal law that is not based on constitutional law. And there is no constitutional law that is not based on social values. Got it? Good. Now, in Africa, before the white man came, there is no African society that had democracy in the way we understand it today, before the advent of colonialism. Okay? All African societies were monarchies or semi-monarchies. But there was no democracy, institutionalized bureaucracy like we have it in the modern world. So, the concept of a public purse, is alien to African social consciousness. What we have is my private purse, my family's purse, and the king's purse. The king's purse is his problem. Any purse, any money that is not mine is not my problem. If you want to have a problem with me, come and touch my own money. That is why in African societies, we burn people for stealing pencils. But, well, we reward them, we recognize them, we respect them when they're accused of stealing millions of dollars of public money. Public money is not an emotional concept that Africans understand. And where public money exists, there is a social idea that beats it in the concept of the African man. That concept is Ubuntu. I am my brother's keeper. If I am my brother's keeper, it takes higher precedence over dry, technical, legal prescriptions against corruption or for ethical behavior in public service. That means even if my brother does not qualify for a job, a contract, I have to find a way to give it to him because I am my brother's keeper. It is a higher moral law than the technical administrative laws that define anti-corruption laws in the continent. That is why anti-corruption laws have failed throughout Africa. The people do not have an emotional connection to anti-corruption legislation. All anti-corruption legislation are technical, legal, academic. They lack emotional, cultural validity. Now, does that mean the Africans are thieves? No. If you steal from an African his personal purse, he'll put a tie around your neck and burn you. But if you steal public money, what's his business? It's because Africans are proud people who have a strong sense of, I will work hard for what is mine. What is not mine is not my problem. And that is why we are not as vigorous, as aggressive in defending the public purse. All anti-corruption laws have simply copied European and Western ideas of morality that are built on their own manifestations of individuality, as distinct from the Ubuntu, the communal nature of the African society. All anti-corruption laws have copied models of Western social ideas and brought them to Africa. They are not more ethical or less ethical than what we have. I'm simply explaining why we have the bug in the system, why we have anti-corruption laws that do not work, that cannot convict people, that people do not believe in, that people do not honor. So therefore, every anti-corruption law is basically trying to criminalize deviance. I think that is a concept in sociology, the criminalization of deviance. It is wrong because you are criminalizing something that the criminal does not believe to be a crime, to be morally wrong. In his spirit and in his heart, he believes that he's entitled to do that in order to take care of those who depend on him. He sees it as the greater good to take care of himself, his clan, and his extended dependents and clients for whom he's the patron. So every anti-corruption law that does not come from a place of understanding this idea will obviously fail, because as soon as you arrest the person who has stolen public funds, his relatives gather and say it is persecuting us, not just him. Remember, he is his brother's keeper. The money he has stolen it for us. And they do not think of it as theft. They think of it as basically it's his turn. Take some and salt it away to take care of our clan. If they understood it as theft, then anti-corruption laws will be much more effective. They will literally be willing to go to this person's house, burn down the house, and burn him down, like they do to the petty theft, like they do to the petty thief. But because they do not emotionally connect public property with private property, the concept of theft in public life and the concept of theft in private life are disconnected. So every anti-corruption law that tries to deal with public theft, public integrity, without understanding the emotional disconnect between theft of private property to the African man and theft or the concept of public property to the African mind, is doomed to failure, as the data shows. Now, how do we solve this problem? I'm not here claiming to have all the solutions, all the answers. This is, after all, a platform for discussion. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Ciao. This morning, a policy by the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria was brought to my attention. The ministry has said that it's going to limit the number of subjects that students take and go deeper into subjects that have real-world validity. This is such a brilliant policy. I applaud it in the strongest possible terms. And if I may, I encourage, scrap a number of courses entirely. Don't just drop them. Scrap them, burn the certificates of anybody who has even taken those courses before, issue them new certificates. For example, sociology. Let's just start with sociology. Everybody who has studied sociology, let's take away their certificates, burn it, and give them something new. Maybe zoology. Let's give them certificate in zoology and send them to take care of animals. Just joke.